Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Prepare to discover the best-saved secret in history. How did Christina from Sweden of the royal palace escape through her secret tunnels? Subscribe and activate the bell so as not to miss anything about this incredible story. Imagine, for a moment, a young, intelligent and determined woman who challenged all the conventions of her time. That was Christina de Sweden, queen at age 6, an unusual monarch, with an insatiable thirst for knowledge and a brilliant mind that led her to make radical and unexpected decisions. You will know its history, a story full of mysteries and bold getaways. She was not a traditional queen, concerned only about protocol and appearances. Christina preferred the company of philosophers and intellectuals to that of courtiers. Her curiosity led her to collect books, works of art and ancient objects, turning her palace into a vibrant cultural center. For you, it will be fascinating to discover how her agile and rebel mind separated her from the expected roads. His conversion to Catholicism, a decision that surprised everyone, marked a turning point in his life. This decision, taken in secret, was key to its subsequent escape. It was a bold decision, full of risks and consequences, which will reveal an even more complex facet of this fascinating historical figure. Think of Sweden in the 17th century. It was not the power we know today. It was a kingdom in full transformation, a melting pot of cultures where Lutheranism had settled firmly, marking social and political life. But the inheritance of the past was still felt, the influence of the old Viking traditions and the growing ambition to expand its influence on the Baltic Sea. The Swedish monarchy was consolidating, with kings and queens struggling to affirm its authority. Remember that it was a time of constant wars and alliances, where diplomacy and military force were essential tools to survive. Sweden was in a strategic geographical position, which made it a key actor in European conflicts. The Swedish economy, at that time, depended a lot on forest exploitation and mining, but also on maritime trade. Imagine the boats furrowing the Baltic, loaded with wood, mineral and other products, weaving a commercial network that connected Sweden with the rest of Europe. It was a time of great economic changes, with the emergence of new social classes and the development of cities. Imagine Christina little you, surrounded by luxuries in the royal palace of Stockholm, but she was not a common girl from an early age. He showed exceptional intelligence and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. While other princesses played with dolls, she preferred the company of old books and scholars of the court. His curiosity was voracious, his mind, a whirlwind of ideas that challenged the conventions of the time. He was not interested in dances or palatial parties. He preferred the intellectual debate, the philosophical discussions, and the company of men of letters that challenged it intellectually. His education was exceptional, even for the standards of royalty, receiving instruction in Latin, Greek, philosophy, and arts. She learned to ride a skill, an unusual skill for women of her time. His personality was strong, independent, and sometimes even considered rebellious for the canons of the time. He did not settle for the passive role expected of a princess. She wanted to understand the world, actively participate in him, and mark her own path. Her inclination for Stoic philosophy and Renaissance humanism took her away from the rigid norms of the court. You can imagine it, right? A different princess. But his education, went far beyond what was expected of a princess. Forget the work of a court of the court. Christina devoured books, from classical philosophy to complex mathematics, studying with some of the best teachers in Europe. His curiosity was insatiable, and his intelligence shone with a light that dazzled everyone around him. He did not settle for the basics, he sought deep knowledge. He dominated several languages, enjoyed intellectual debates with scholars and academics, and passionate about the arts. Not only did he learn to play musical instruments, but he was also interested in sculpture and painting. His education was a constant search for truth, an exploration without limits of knowledge. Far from the conventions of the time, she wanted to understand the world, not just decorate it. He had access to real libraries full of prohibited works for many, and to teachers who challenged her intellectually, promoting her critical spirit and independence of thought. This exceptional education not only molded her mind, but also forged her character, preparing it for a future that no one could imagine. A future that would take her far from the walls of the palace. Think about the magnitude of your learning, in the audacity of your interests. /prosody, /speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. And so, just 6 years old, you became the heiress to the Swedish throne. Imagine. A girl surrounded by counselors, nobles, and the heavy burden of an entire kingdom on your little shoulders. A world of men, of political intrigues and territorial wars, awaited you. But you, with your agile mind and your insatiable thirst for knowledge, you were ready to face it. Or at least you thought. Your coronation was an impressive show, a deployment of power and tradition. But behind the brightness of jewels and ceremonies, palatial tensions were hidden. The nobles, accustomed to handling power, were not willing to easily give it to a young queen, however intelligent it was. You faced the resistance of the court, silent conspiracies and doubts about your ability to govern. Despite the difficulties, you cling to the throne firmly. Your intelligence and your determination allowed you to navigate the complexities of European policy of the 17th century. You surrounded yourself with trusted directors, although many doubted your judgment, and you began to implement your own ideas, challenging the conventions and expectations of a deeply patriarchal society. You were the queen, and you refused to be a simple decorative figure. But you weren't just a girl, right? From the beginning, you showed surprising intelligence and ambition. At your young age, you started making crucial decisions for the future of Sweden. You surrounded yourself with brilliant directors, but you also had your own opinion, firm and bold. The reforms you implemented were bold, some even revolutionary for the time. You promoted education and arts, sponsoring artists and scientists. But your reforms were not limited to the cultural field. You also faced the powerful Swedish nobility, challenging its privileges and seeking to strengthen the power of the crown. This naturally caused a lot of controversy. Some supported you, seeing in you a modern and progressive leader. Others, however, fiercely opposed your changes. They feared the loss of their power and influence. Your decisions, although with good intentions, generated political tensions that threatened the stability of the kingdom. Your youth and your determination made you an easy target for the criticisms and intrigues of the court. The pressure was immense, but you went ahead, firm in your convictions. But you, Christina, had other plans. While the European courts stirred with marriage proposals to ensure political alliances, you flatly denied yourself. Imagine the shock. A queen, the sovereign of Sweden, rejecting the marriage, a fundamental pillar of the society of the time. For you, marriage represented a golden prison, a limitation to your ambition and your desire to reign with total freedom. Your rejection was not a whim. It was a bold statement against social conventions, a challenge to the tradition that saw you as a simple piece in a political chess game. You wanted to govern your own criteria, without the bonds of a husband or the pressures of a court that sought to marry the queen for convenience. The pressure was immense, but your determination was greater. Thinking about marrying, and submitting your will to that of another, seemed to you an intolerable idea. Your restless mind, eager for knowledge and power, rebelled against the expectations that society imposed you. You longed for a life dedicated to study, art, politics, without the ties of marriage. It was a revolutionary decision for the time, an act of rebellion that would mark your reign forever. But your rejection of marriage did not mean a departure from public life, on the contrary. Your passion for art and culture became your new obsession. In Stockholm, surrounded by intellectuals and artists, you dedicated yourself to building a vibrant court, a melting pot of ideas where music, literature, and plastic arts flourished. We bought masterpieces, we financed promising artists, and turned your palace into a European-renowned cultural center. Do you remember Bernini, the Italian sculptor? You attracted it to your cut, you took works and you treated him as an equal. It was not just about collecting, you understood art as a vehicle for human knowledge and expression, a way of transcending politics and social conventions. Your patronage was not a simple power ostentation but a true passion. Your collection grew exponentially, attracting the best talents throughout Europe. Paints, sculptures, ancient books, each piece was carefully selected, reflecting your refined taste and interest in history, mythology, and philosophy. You financed ambitious artistic projects, commissioned works to renowned artists, and protected those less known, ensuring that their talents will shine. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. But your reign was not exempt from conflicts. Sweden, mostly Lutheran, saw with suspicion your growing interest in Catholicism. Imagine the tension. You, the queen, hugging a different faith from that of your people. The courtesans whispered, the nobles were divided, and the Swedish church watched you with distrust. Your conversion, although personal, generated a political earthquake. The pressure increased. The sermons in the churches became increasingly critical. Some even attacked you directly. The Lutheran nobility feared for their power and privileges, seeing in your faith a threat to its stability. The court became an ideological battlefield, where every decision of yours was analyzed under the prism of religion. Your insistence on maintaining your Catholic faith, despite the political consequences, was not just a matter of personal conviction. It was a declaration of independence, a challenge to established power. But this challenge had a price. The growing hostility, the conspiracy against you, the constant social pressure, all this pushed you towards a radical decision. But the threat not only came from the church. Within your own kingdom, the nobility watched you with distrust. Many Swedish nobles, accustomed to more direct power, rented your most centralized government style. Conspiracy whispers filled the halls of the palace. You, young queen, had to navigate a sea of political intrigues to keep your crown. Some noble, powerful, and ambitious sought to weaken you, even conspire to overthrow you. They saw you as a threat to their traditional power. The secret letters, clandestine meetings, hidden alliances, everything was part of a dangerous game in which your own survival was at stake. Your reign became a constant struggle for power. The pressure was immense. Every decision you made was analyzed, criticized, and used against you. You should be cunning, predict the movements of your enemies, and form strategic alliances to counteract threats to your crown. It was a constant dance between survival and power, where a false step could mean your fall. Your reign, Christina, was marked by constant tension with the Swedish nobility. They, accustomed to traditional power, saw your reforms and your style of governing, so different from your predecessors. Many considered you a threat to their privileges and their influence on court. They felt that your attachment to French culture and modern ideas undermined the basis of the power established in Sweden. The distrust was palpable at each meeting of the council, in each poaching. However, not all the nobles were against you. Some, more open to change or simply eager for real favoritism, became your allies. These nobles saw in you an opportunity to ascend socially and obtain political benefits. They formed a faction that supported you, although with their own agendas and ambitions, creating a complex network of loyalty and betrayals within the court. This fragmentation of the nobility gave you a certain margin of maneuver, but it also made you a piece on a dangerous chess board. The ability to navigate between these alliances and conflicts was crucial for your political survival. You should balance the support of your allies with the need to control your enemies. A false step, a poorly calculated decision, could trigger a conspiracy or even an open rebellion. The palatial intrigue became your daily battlefield, a power game in which each movement had unpredictable consequences. Your cunning and your ability to read people were your greatest weapons. But you, Christina, you felt a growing discomfort in Stockholm. The rigid cut, with its intricate protocols and its constant power disputes, suffocated you. You no longer felt comfortable with the rigid conventions of the Swedish nobility. You longed for a change, a life beyond real obligations, a life where you could explore your intellectual interests without the throne pressures. Religious life, so important to the Swedish society of the time, began not to satisfy your concerns. Theological disputes seemed empty, and you were looking for a truth beyond the established dogmas. That desire for knowledge and intellectual freedom became a heavier load than the crown itself. Your restless mind pushed you towards new horizons. Life in court, with its ceremonies and its rigid codes of conduct, became increasingly oppressive. You, with your free and curious spirit, yearned for a less structured life, more dedicated to study, art, and reflection, far from the weight of the crown and the expectations of the nobility. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Your growing discomfort in the Swedish court was not only because of the rigidity of the protocol, but for something much deeper. Lutheran religion, the faith of your childhood, began to feel like a shirt of force. Theological discussions, solemn ceremonies, everything seemed empty, lacking the spiritual fervor you were looking for. You began to question your beliefs, to look for answers beyond the walls of the castle. The influence of the Jesuits, with their fervor and eloquence, became a magnet for your restless soul. His arguments resonated in a way that the cold Lutheran doctrine had never achieved. In secret, you started studying Catholicism, reading prohibited texts, holding clandestine conversations. It was a huge risk, a betrayal of your own crown, but the search for truth exceeded any fear. Finally, after a long period of introspection and internal debate, you made the decision. Convert to Catholicism. It was a radical act, a renunciation of everything that represented your life until that moment. The Swedish crown, the pressure of your family, the fear of the reaction of your people, everything paled in front of the force of your new faith. It was a decision that would change the course of your life forever. So, you hugged Catholicism. A decision that, although brought you inner peace, triggered a storm in Sweden. Imagine the reaction, your conversion, a direct blow to the national identity, to the faith of your people. Suddenly, the Queen, the most powerful figure in the kingdom, abandoned the Lutheran religion, the cornerstone of the Swedish identity. Discontent began to grow as an uncontrollable weed. The rumors spread like gunpowder. The press, the clergy, the common people, everyone commented on your decision. Many saw you as a traitor, a heretic that had abandoned his people. Hate letters, street murmuring, veiled threats, all this became your new reality. Your decision, which sought spiritual peace, brought with it a deep political loneliness. The pressure on you was immense. Your family, although partly comprehensive, also felt the weight of public disapproval. The nobility, divided, was positioned in favor or against, creating a deep fracture in the court. The rejection of the Swedish people was not just a matter of faith. It was a national identity crisis that made you the epicenter of a political and social storm. But your conversion was not just a religious problem, right? The Swedish nobility, accustomed to its power and influence, saw you as a threat. Imagine a young queen, influenced by Catholic ideas, possibly allying with foreign powers. A true earthquake for her plans. They began to murmur, conspire in the shadows, weaving intrigues in the palatial halls and in the darkest corners of the kingdom. The discontent grew as an unstoppable snowball. Some noble, powerful, and ambitious saw in your change of faith the perfect opportunity to destabilize the kingdom and, why not, to seize power. Secret alliances were woven, encrypted cards were exchanged, they gathered in clandestine places to put your fall. Remember, you were the queen, but they had influence, money, and connections, and would not hesitate to use them to achieve their goals. The pressure on you was immense. Not only religious pressure, but politics. Every day that passed, the conspiracies became more dangerous, the most direct threats. You felt trapped in a web of intrigues, surrounded by people who were previously loyal to you, but now conspired against you. The palace, which was once your safe home, had become a scenario of betrayal and deception. What would you do? So, how did you plan your great escape? It wasn't something improvised, right? He had to require a network of silent, reliable allies, willing to risk everything for you. I imagine nights of secret whispers, maps deployed under the light of the candles, and the palpable tension of each clandestine encounter. Planning had to be meticulous, every detail carefully considered to avoid detection. The palace tunnels, an underground labyrinth known only for a few, became your escape. You had to fully trust the loyalty of those who knew their intricate passages. How many nights will you have spent studying the plans, imagining every step, every possible obstacle? The risk was immense. A single failure could mean your capture. The hour of flight, the choice of the precise moment, must have been crucial. You had to consider the routines of the guard, the movement patterns inside the palace, and above all, the climate. A storm, for example, could have facilitated your escape, but also have complicated it greatly. It must have been a decision full of tension and millimeter calculation. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. The escape could not be a whim. It must be meticulously planned, every crucial detail for success. You thought about the weather, on the moon, the arrangement of the guards. Can you imagine the long nights studying the movements of the soldiers, looking for the minimum failure in their routine? An error, however small, could mean the difference between freedom and capture. It was not only a tunnel, but a complex operation that required the precise moment. One day with a reduced guard, a storm that hinders visibility, or feast that distracted the sentries. What was the trigger? That subtle variation in the court routine that allowed you to identify the perfect gap in security. Remember, every second had a delay, and the whole plan would go down. The pressure should be immense. The weight of the decision, of the responsibility of your own life and that of your accomplices on your shoulders. How did you stay at that overwhelming pressure? How did you ensure that each piece of the puzzle would fit perfectly? Imagine those passages hidden under the palace, a labyrinth of stone and shadows. Tunnels excavated for centuries, some so narrow that they barely allowed the passage of a person, others wide enough to house a carriage. Its walls, wet and cold, whisper stories of real secrets and forgotten conspiracies. The air itself seems heavy, loaded with the story that is breathed in each crack of the stone. Some tunnels led to hidden courtyards, others in black and deep wells, and some, they said, led directly outside the palace, far from the curious eyes of the guards. Can you imagine the darkness, silence, the weight of the story on your shoulders while traveling those secret passages? The risk was huge, but freedom, an even greater prize. For centuries, the existence of these tunnels remained secret, known only for a privileged few. Its layout was a mystery, a secret map saved jealously. For you, however, they became the only escape route, a network of passages that offered you the possibility of a new life, far from the oppression and rigidity of the court that a winding path to freedom. Imagine the scene. You, Christina, in the middle of the night, surrounded by ancient and heavy trunks. The candlelight projects long shadows on the walls of your bedroom. What to pack for an escape that can change your life forever? There is no space for luxuries, only the essentials. First, your most precious jewels. Those that remind you of your real past, but that could also ensure your future. A few discreet dresses, enough to stay warm and decent in exile. Then, think about the documentation. Important papers, letters, maybe some family portrait that reminds you of the home you leave. A few books, your favorites, to keep your mind and spirit alive during the trip. Do not forget cash. Discreetly hidden, enough to start a new life away from everything you know. Remember, discretion is fundamental. Finally, the most important thing, your value. The courage to face the unknown, the determination to build a new life. These are the most valuable treasures that you can carry with you. Remember that everything material is ephemeral, but your spirit, your inner strength, will always accompany you. Prepare your heart, because the escape is just the beginning of a great adventure. The silence of the night was dense, almost palpable. Only the clock tic-tac on the wall broke the tension. You, Christina, you felt the frantic beat of your heart in the chest, a rhythm accompanied to the anxiety that you felt. Each shadow projected by the candles looked like a spectrum, a warning of what was to come. The air itself seemed to contain breathing, expectant. Outside, the wind whispered among the trees of the royal garden, a whisper that seemed to conspire with your plans. You listened carefully, every crunch, every sigh of the night made you more alert. Would it be the time? Would you hear steps to give you? The weight was unbearable, a torment that forced you to contain breathing, to be a shadow in your own shadow. Finally, the signal arrived. A slight blow to the door, almost imperceptible. Your heart broke. It was the time. The tension became a strange mixture of adrenaline and determination. The flight, that risky plan, so secret, was about to begin. You breathed deeply, trying to control the emotion that flooded you and prepared for the unknown. The cold of the stone froze your skin as you advanced through the narrow tunnel. Each step was a whisper, a silent prayer for darkness to protect you. The air, thick and humid, touched your face, loaded with the smell of ground and something else, a fear, perhaps your heart. A frantic drum on your chest marked the rhythm of your flight. The torch in your hand barely illuminated enough to avoid tripping with the irregular stones of the ground. Prosody, speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of your steps and the whisper of your own breathing. You felt the moisture dripping from the roof, every tuff a whip in silence. You should keep calm. Any noise could alert your persecutors. You remembered the words of your accomplice, the instructions whispered to the ear in the dark of your room. Follow straight, then to the left. The uncertainty of you carcomed. How long did you have been walking? Was this the right path? The darkness was absolute, an abyss that seemed to swallow you. But the idea of freedom, of the future that awaited you away from here, promoted you forward. Each step was a victory, a small crack in the prison that had locked you. Your escape was not a lonely task. Remember Magnus Gabriel de la Gardie, the Swedish nobleman who risked everything for you. His discretion and his connections in court were crucial. He provided you with the secret maps of the tunnels, a knowledge that only a few possessed. Without him, your escape would have been impossible. He was your shadow, silent and faithful, preparing every detail with surgical precision. But Magnus did not act alone. Think of Countess Ebba Sperre, a woman of great influence and courage. Its unconditional loyalty allowed you to access privileged information, opening doors that seemed impassable. She gave you refuge at crucial moments. Her house became a safe point in your risky journey. His audacity was as vital as the cunning of de la Garde. And do not forget the faithful servants, those who risked their lives for your freedom. His complicit silences, his discreet gestures, his appropriate alerts, everything was essential for your flight. They, anonymous but fundamental, formed a support network that allowed you to overcome the dangers that lurked in every corner of the palace. His silent courage allowed you to reach the mouth of the tunnel. Finally, after days of clandestine trip and nights of restlessness, you divided the coast. The ship, small and discreet, was quietly approaching the port. Relief flooded you, a mixture of tiredness and hope. You had escaped from Stockholm, the pressure of the court, of the life you no longer wanted. The port, still unknown, represented a new beginning, an opportunity to breathe and decide your future. The landing was fast and silent. Your companions, faithful and discreet, helped you get off the ship with the same caution with which they had watched for your safety during the crossing. You felt vulnerable, but the emotion of freedom exceeded any fear. They were waiting for new challenges, new meetings, but for the first time in a long time, you had control. On the mainland, the feeling of freedom was even more intense. The air, although loaded with the sea salt, seemed cleaner to you, more pure. The port, with its particular sounds and smells, was a new world, a blank page where to write your own history. Magnus Gabriel had assured you that you were safe, that your new life would begin here, and you, for the first time in a long time, allowed you to believe it. The ship finally moved away from the coast. The trip to Rome promised to be long and hard. You were in a small ship, surrounded by taciturn sailors and the incessant stroke of the ocean. The smell of salt and wood permeated the air, an aroma that mixed with the fear of the unknown. Each wave was a reminder of the fragility of your situation, an escape that led you to an uncertain future, but far from the oppression that had forced you to escape. The weeks became months. The storms hit you mercilessly, testing your physical and mental resistance. Hunger and disease stalked constantly, and the monotony of the trip became unbearable. But you, with an unwavering willing will, went ahead, clinging to the hope of reaching Rome, a place where you could find refuge and start a new life, free from the pressures of the court. Finally, in the distance, you divided land. After so much time on the high seas, the vision of the coast filled you with immense joy. You knew that a long road was still waiting for you to Rome, but the end of the maritime journey was a triumph in itself. With each stroke that the ship advanced, anxiety became a cautious anticipation. The destination, finally, seemed to be within your reach. Finally, Rome. The landing was chaotic, but you, hidden under a simple veil and accompanied by your faithful company lady, you managed to go unnoticed. The city overwhelmed you with its bustle and its beauty. A total difference to the cold Stockholm, you settled in a discreet palace, far from the splendor of your real past, but with sufficient comfort to enjoy your new life. Forget for a moment the crown, think of freedom. /prosody /speak. Speak. Prosody rate equals 90%. Your new identity, that of an exiled princess, but free, allowed you a quieter life, but no less interesting. You dedicated yourself to study, surrounding you with scholars and artists, arguing philosophy, theology, and art. The conversation flowed, you felt alive, intellectually stimulated, far from the rigid protocol of the Swedish court. Your new role, that of patron of the arts, filled you with satisfaction. You financed artistic projects, protected from talented artists, and you became a cultural reference in the Eternal City. It was a different power than you had exercised as queen, but not less significant. You felt useful, creative, and, above all, free. And then the day came. Your heart was beating hard while you were preparing for the encounter. A sober, but elegant dress hid the anxiety that you felt. The apostolic palace received you with its imposing solemnity, a contrast to the Roman bustle to which you had already become accustomed. You knew that this encounter was not only an audience, but an act of faith, a public statement of your new life. Pope Innocent X, with his penetrating gaze, received you with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The atmosphere was dense, full of expectation. Your conversion to Catholicism was a political and religious event of great importance, a bold step that many observed with skepticism. But you, firmly in your voice, expressed your faith. your reasons to leave your past behind and embrace a new life under the protection of the church. The conversation was brief, but significant. At IT was not a deep theological discussion, but an exchange of looks, gestures, silences loaded with meaning. At that moment, in that sacred space, you seal your commitment to the Catholic faith. It was a symbolic act, a crucial step in your new life, an act of faith that would resonate through the centuries. But Rome was not just palatial intrigues. You found a new refuge in art. Your passion, latent for years in Stockholm, flourished with intensity in the Eternal City. Remember those days, touring the workshops of the great teachers, observing the precise technique of each brushstroke, the perfect mixture of colors. You became a patron, a protective of talented artists, promoting their creativity with generosity. You commissioned masterpieces not only for aesthetic pleasure, but because you thought in the transforming power of art. Each canvas, each sculpture, was an expression of your free and independent spirit, a way of leaving your indelible mark on history. Think about the faces of the astonishment of the artists when they received your support, in the emotion of seeing their works life. Your patronage was not limited to painting, sculpture, music. All the arts captivated you. You surrounded yourself with the best talents of the time, creating a vibrant and creative atmosphere in your intimate circle. Remember the long evening, full of music and stimulating conversations, where art became universal language. Remember those days in Rome, you, surrounded by artists and scholars. You became an influential patron, attracting bright figures to your circle. But Roman life, with its intricate social fabric, was not exempt from rivalries. Some admired you deeply, others, they saw you suspicious, even with envy, for your influence and your position. Among your closest friends were some of the most important names of the art and culture of the time. You shared with them long conversations, intellectual debates, and an unlimited passion for knowledge. But there were also those who saw your patronage as a threat, who conspired in the shadows, jealous of your position and your influence on the Roman artistic scene. Envy, intrigue, and competition for your favor became a constant game. You, with your sharp ingenuity and your ability to discern, navigated with skill for this sea of friendships and rivalries. You learned to identify the true friends of flatterers, to separate loyalty from convenience. Rome taught you a valuable lesson. Power attracts both admiration and envy. But Rome, with all his glories, was not Sweden. Your exile was a bold decision, an abandonment of the crown, but also a leap towards freedom that you longed for. Imagine the weight of the decision, the uncertainty of the future, far from the palace, far from the familiarity of your country. You were in a new territory, with new rules, new customs. A new chapter began in your life, full of challenges but also of opportunities. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%. Life as an exiled queen was not easy. Gone were the real phases, the opulent ceremonies, the absolute power. Now, you depended on the generosity of others, on the goodwill of the potatoes and the powerful of the time. Your ingenuity and your charisma, however, were still your best weapons. Your ability to attract bright people around you did not vanish, and in your new exile you managed to build a network of friendships and contacts that helped you navigate this new world. Despite the difficulties, you found a space for your passion for arts and letters. Your exile became a new stage of patronage, supporting artists and thinkers who shared your vision of the world. Remember those moments of intellectual creation, those passionate debates, those friends that enriched you and helped you overcome the loneliness of life away from your home. Life had taken you along an unexpected path, but you, with your indomitable spirit, made it an adventure. But, can you imagine trying to recover a crown that you had already abandoned? From Rome, the possibility seemed remote, almost a fantasy. Swedish political intrigues, thousands of kilometers, were a maze that you didn't want to navigate. Your resignation had been definitive, at least you thought. However, some Swedish, nostalgic nobles of your reign or with their own agendas tried to contact you. Letters full of promises and suggestions, hinting at the possibility of a triumphal return. His proposals tempted you, yes, but the freedom you had found in exile was a treasure too valuable to risk it. Life in the Swedish court, with its rigid norms and pressures, was a distant memory, although sometimes, in moments of solitude, nostalgia invaded you. But the idea of returning to that political whirlwind, with its struggles of power and its betrayals, seemed more weight than a crown. The letters continued to arrive, each a new proposal, a new opportunity, but you rejected them one after another. The price of the crown, you had discovered it, was too high. You had paid that price for years, and now, finally, you refused to pay it again. The possibility of recovering the Swedish throne faded with each letter you left without answering. Every day that passed in your self-imposed exile. But his influence did not stay in the attempt to recover the throne. Think of the patronage that provided artists and scientists. He had an exquisite taste, right? His cut in Rome became a vibrant cultural center, attracting great minds of the time. She herself, with her peculiar personality, became a fascinating character for posterity, an early example of a monarch that challenged the rules of his time. His conversion to Catholicism, although controversial, impacted European policy. Imagine the reactions in the different kingdoms. Sweden's influence on the international stage was affected, of course, but his figure continued to generate debate and analysis for centuries. It became a symbol, although complex, of female power and the search for personal identity. His personal library, full of classic and contemporary works, demonstrates his interest in knowledge and culture. Many of those books continue to exist. Incredible, right? These texts reflect their thinking and concerns, offering a unique vision of a complex era. Its intellectual legacy continues to inspire scholars and researchers today. So, although his attempt to recover the throne was failed, its impact on European culture and politics is undeniable. Its history, full of audacity and controversy, continues to fascinate us. It is a figure that transcends its time and invites us to reflect on the power, identity, and search for individual freedom, even for a queen. But did you know that her passion for art was not the only thing that defined her? Christina felt a true fascination with science, and their cut, luxury surrounded. The brightest thinkers of the time also swarmed. Imagine, discussions about astronomy, physics, natural philosophy, all in the middle of sumptuous halls. She herself collected scientific instruments, books, and corresponded to some of the most important scientists of her time. It was not limited to being a passive patron. He was deeply interested in understanding the new discoveries and theories that were revolutionizing the world. For her, science was another way of exploring the universe, both physical and intellectual. Think of the time. The scientific revolution was booming, and Christina was there, in her heart, not only financing research, but actively participating in intellectual conversations and debates. Her insatiable curiosity led her to support scientists such as mentioning a relevant scientist if desired, maintaining the focus on Christina's interaction with science, thus contributing to the progress of knowledge. Prosody, speak. Speak, prosody rate equals 90%, but his agile mind did not stop in science. You would also surprise yourself to know that Christina was an avid reader in his library, a book treasure in different languages. He found shelter and food for his intellect. Imagine, hundreds of volumes bound in leather with golden letters, hoping to be discovered by the curious queen. From Greek classics to the most modern works of his time, everything had a place in his collection. Not only read, but also wrote. His letters, full of intelligence and insight, are a window to their complex personality. There was acuity in his writing, an ability to express his ideas with clarity and precision that impresses even today. You could imagine the pen on the parchment, giving life to his thoughts. His interest in literature transcended simple reading. She actively participated in the intellectual world of her time, exchanging correspondence with important literary and philosophical figures. It was a patron of the arts and letters, protecting writers and artists who shared their ideas. Think of animated conversations, full of debates and new ideas that had to occur in their court. But his passion was not limited to books. Do you imagine Christina, queen and scholar, enjoying a theatrical representation? She not only attended, she lived it. The theater was for her a universe of emotions, a way of understanding the world and the human condition. The works, a reflection of society, captivated her, challenged her, inspired her. It wasn't just a passive spectator. You would be surprised to know how much the creative process interested him. From the writing of the pieces to the staging, he talked with playwrights, actors and directors, exchanging ideas and opinions, always willing to learn and enrich his understanding of art. His cut was a hotbed of artistic activity, and the theater occupied a central place. He organized representations in the palace, inviting the best artists of the time. Imagine the evenings full of splendor, music, costumes, the emotion contained in each scene. A true feast for the senses, but his passion for the arts did not end in the theater. Did you know that Christina was a patron of music? His court became a melting pot of composers and musicians from all over Europe. Imagine private concerts in the palaces, music echoing in the opulent rooms. An unforgettable experience. She attracted virtuosos of the time, promoting musical creation and the dissemination of new techniques. His taste covered from Italian music with its operas and complex compositions to the lighter and more popular pieces. It was a great promoter of musical cultural exchange. Can you imagine the impact it had? The Queen not only enjoyed music. I understood it deeply. His education allowed him to appreciate the complexity of the compositions and the ability of the interpreters. His support for musicians was not only economic, but also in terms of recognition and prestige. They gave them a space to express and create, leaving an indelible mark. But Christina's life, so full of brightness and eccentricity, ended up wrapped in a mystery. His death, at 54, in Rome, left many wondering what really happened. Historical sources differ, offering contradictory versions that feed speculation. Some speak of a sudden disease, others of a poisoning. Can you imagine all the theories that arose over the centuries? The official version points to a fever, but the speed of its decline and the lack of precise details fed suspicions. Remember that Christina was a powerful figure, with enemies and allies in the highest circles of power. Would there be someone who would like to silence her forever? Uncertainty persists, turning his death into a fascinating enigma. Years later, the lack of an autopsy and ambiguity of medical records only contributed to the mystery. The palatial intrigues, political rivalries, even rumors of poison. Everything mixes in a nebula of speculation. And you, what do you think really happened? Was it a natural disease, a conspiracy, or something even more mysterious? But you already know that Christina was not just a queen who escaped for secret tunnels. Its history goes far beyond a simple flight. She became a myth, a fascinating and at the same time controversial figure that continues to captivate centuries later. Imagine. A woman who renounces her crown, leaves her country and embarks on an adventure full of risks and uncertainties, just to follow her own ideals. Her conversion to Catholicism, her patronage of the arts and her life in Rome, far from the rigidity of the Swedish court, transformed it into a legendary figure. Many admired her for her courage and intelligence, for challenging the conventions of her time. But others criticized her for her radical decisions, for her eccentricity, for her rejection of traditional monarchical life. She was a woman who broke molds. Prosody, speak. Speak, to prosody rate equals 90%. That duality, that mixture of admiration and controversy, is precisely what has made it such a memorable character. His image, often represented with a penetrating look and an air of mystery, has inspired artists, writers, and historians for centuries. What is behind that look? What promoted your bold decisions? Those are questions that continue to resonate today, feeding Christina's myth of Sweden. But how did Christina escape? Its flight was a complex operation, orchestrated with stealth and precision. Imagine. Secret tunnels, silent accomplices, and a network of contacts that helped her cross borders. It was not an impulsive decision, but the result of meticulous planning, a planned escape to the smallest detail to avoid being captured. The consequences of his escape were immediate and transcendental. In Stockholm, the power vacuum generated instability. His resignation to the throne caused a political and religious crisis, with different factions fighting for control. For you, seeing how a queen leaves her kingdom in secret is shocking, right? But Christina's escape also had an impact on her own life. He faced the uncertainty of exile, the need to reinvent himself away from the crown. Think about the value that was needed to leave everything known behind. His decision had deep personal consequences, marking his destiny forever. Think about what your decision meant. A queen, abandoning her throne, rejecting the life that was expected of her. That, my friend, it wasn't just an escape, it was a statement. A declaration of independence, of personal freedom, which resonated through the centuries. He broke with the conventions of his time, showing a value and determination that very few dare to show. His escape became a symbol of rebellion against the social expectations imposed on women, particularly power of power. Imagine the impact. A queen who chooses his own path, who refuses to be defined by his gender or position. That audacity, that courage, continues to inspire those who dare to challenge what is established. His legacy transcends the political. Christina became an iconic figure, an example of self-determination and search for one's identity. She challenged the rules of her time, opening a path, even if it is a little-traveled path, for future generations of women who would fight for their own freedom and the ability to define their own destinations. Don't you think incredible? I hope you enjoyed the story of Christina de Sweden. If you liked it, give like and subscribe for more. What did you think about escaping? /prosody? /speak.